Right now, I want to talk to my partner in crime on the Hold That podcast. We'll record later today. Find it wherever podcasts are. It's under the Athletic banner. He writes for The Athletic. Use the promo code athletic.com/hold that podcast, 30% off what I think is the best sports sites out there for all sports. I'm talking about Brody Miller. Brody, what's up, bro? What's going on?
Not too much, man. I guess hurricane prepping, but it seems like we might actually be all right. But other than that, I'm good, man. How are you doing?
Yeah, fingers crossed. Marco didn't want any of this smoke. We'll see how Laura's feeling. We'll continue to watch that next couple of days. I'm feeling great. Been a fun show today. Before we dive into college football, though, Brody, you are a big Sixers fan. Brett Brown has been fired. Sure. Y'all are swept. It looks like the process has failed. How are you feeling as a Sixers fan today?
It's been a really genuinely sad and dark few days. For example, I didn't even watch Game 4, which is rare for me. Am at that point. I mean, listen, we literally purposely – I've been through this 7 to 8 year process of purposely tanking it and doing all these things and building up hope. And, 3 years ago, I would argue is, optimistic about the future as any fan base's team has probably ever been. And now I'm looking back on it, and I honestly think they have nowhere to go. They're completely in bad water. I mean, obviously they have two superstars, but they have just blown so much that I have just genuinely think this all might have kind of been for nothing. And it's not because the process didn't work. It's because they absolutely mishandled what they built with the process.
Yeah, it was the post process that didn't work, right? And it kind of does beg the question. Who was the architect of the process? Why am I blanking right now?
Sam Hinkie.
Should they have kept Hinkie around, right? Because they passed it off, and then it seems like every subsequent move has just not paid dividends. I mean, you even had Embiid after they got eliminated, basically lamenting this year's roster, saying, last year we were so close, we had a bunch of great guys, and they went out and changed, and it just never clicked. So. Yeah, dark time to be a Sixers fan, Brody. Not a dark time, hopefully, to be a college football fan. As we are
dark time to be a Big Ten fan.
Yes, it's a dark time. Yeah. Brody's other team, his alma mater, Indiana. This was going to be their year. 9-win Indiana was about to happen, and the football gods just couldn't have the Hoosier State have that kind of success. They had to shut it down. Brody, have you gotten a chance to look at SI's Still Standing 16? This was just released this morning.
Wait, could you repeat that question? You cut out for a quick second.
Have you gotten a chance? And I don't know that you have this morning, so I'm hoping to get your live reactions. Have you looked at Sports Illustrated today? Ross Dellinger, Pat Ford. Okay, so you saw this. You saw the Still Standing 16.
Yes.
Were you surprised to see LSU check in at number 8? Oklahoma State at number 7. I mean, it begs the question, is Ross Dellinger a QAnon believer?
People are talking, Steve-Bob. People are talking. I think we need to get that buzz out there on Ross. But, no, I mean, I'm definitely a little surprised to see it. But, I mean, I think you and I are generally in a similar zone here where it's you can't – there's nowhere you could rank LSU that's inherently unfair. You could put them number 3 and be like, the defending champs, still have a ton of talent. They deserve a higher ranking because their season. I'd be like, yeah, it's fair. I'm not really going to argue that. And you could put them, 8 out of the remaining 16, which is pretty low, but I'd still be like, hey, I can't really argue you. You have a brand new quarterback, a lot of unknowns, a new offensive line. Until proven otherwise, 8 might be a fair place to put it. It's tough. I mean, there's nobody behind them I think should be ahead of them, so in that sense it's fair. I think the only two that really are going to raise massive question marks are, like you said, Oklahoma State and probably Notre Dame. And Notre Dame should be good. They just kind of have lost all benefit of the doubt, I guess you'd say, in most people's eyes because of how the last 2 years have ended. But Oklahoma State's surprising, but I kind of like it because it's a fun one. I would never have put them that high, but I'm here for it because they're a really exciting young team. Chuba Hubbard is obviously a stud, and I think Mike Gundy has kind of proven over the last decade and a half that every 4 years he's going to have a team that genuinely is right there in the mix for maybe even not making the playoff, but at least be in the conversation in November. So hey, I'm here for it. Oklahoma State's one of those teams that just always makes things fun when they're good.
How about I thought also surprising in this Still Standing 16. So obviously I love so much of this because it opens the door for other teams to get in the rankings, and it gives us a picture of just how odd it's going to be, right, without a lot of these squads. But FSU checking in at 15. What do you have a take there? Like how did they sneak up there?
Well, I think that comes from, and that's probably one where, they're probably hearing a lot of things that's talent there. But I mean, here's what I will say, and I forget who wrote it. It might have been Andy Staples a few months back, but it was kind of like a wild prediction thing about, who could be a good playoff bet. Yeah, I think it was Andy Staples. And he was saying, like if you want a really good one, like in that long shot one, Florida State, and his mindset was, I mean, as much as things went really bad with Willie Taggart, he had recruited relatively well, and he had spent 2 years building up the things that fix the inherent issues of the Jimbo era, right? And I think the offensive line had gained some talent. They had put some pieces together. They had fixed just a lot of major issues, and now you, in theory, have a quarterback in James Blackman, who some people believe in. I don't know if I do, but some people do. You have more depth on that team that was there than a few years ago. And Mike Norvell, say what you will about him, has proven he's a pretty darn good coach who can win. So, again, that falls in the category of, like, do I think Florida State would make my top 16 if I made one today? Probably not. But I can at least see it, that, like, it is Florida State. They do always recruit well. They do have talent. Maybe a good coach can kind of right the ship there.
Brody, we're talking to Brody Miller. He writes for The Athletic, covers LSU, does incredible work. We also do the Hold That podcast together every Tuesday. New episodes. We'll record one later today. Wherever your podcast form, you share it and stuff. That helps us out. Brody, we talk a lot of Joe Burrow, or we have on the podcast, obviously. Did you see the stories coming out of Bengals camp yesterday? Burrow, 2-minute drill, 6 of 7, 75-yard touchdown. How about the balls on 4th and 6 to throw a 30-yard game-winning score? What did you think about the Burrow anecdotes that are already starting to leak out of Cincinnati?
Well, it has been funny because as you know, I am pretty private about it, but I was raised a Bengals fan. So the fact that I just haven't been able to escape Joe Burrow once he's finally out of my work purview has been a mix of exciting and upsetting, I guess. But it's been kind of crazy. You basically go on TweetDeck or Twitter any given afternoon these days, and LSU Twitter is basically still just all about Joe Burrow because they're quote tweeting like Paul Boehner and Ben Beamy's reports of whatever Joe Burrow's doing. So I mean, it's been pretty cool to see. I mean, every single day it feels like there's a new one. Yesterday it was that crazy throw and the check down he made, and then they were like, "You can't do that," and he's like, "Well, why not?" Like.
Are you buying the hype? Like, do you think is this going to? And then he also has the quote where he's like, "Have you ever known me to be nervous?" Like, when have you ever seen that? Like, are you buying it? Do you think he's going to have a very successful year one?
I mean, I'll say that I think a rookie coming into a year with no normal off season and this whole thing going on, I have a gut feeling there's going to be some major growing pains because that's just an insane. That's a lot to ask. But is there anyone that I think could be like over prepared for this moment and not scared of it even a little bit? Yeah, I think it's Joe Burrow. And I mean, just like the reports we're getting here are just like nothing's changed. He has somehow won over his teammates in like 6 practices. Sure, you always have to kind of tone down that like media fodder part of it, but it does seem like he's genuinely won them over in days and won over the coaches. So yeah, I mean, I am a believer. My prediction on this team was that they were going to go like the 7-9 year one with Joe Burrow, which is a massive increase because I just kind of think like he's one of those guys who can elevate them enough. So I think I'll have a good year.
Talking to Brody Miller, Brody, earlier we had Coach O on, and kind of the soundbite that probably will live on from that is he said coming off the practice field the other day, he thought Jabril Cox, he thought to himself that Jabril Cox was the best player on that field. And to me, it just, if that is indeed the case, like, has there been any program or how do you kind of describe LSU's success in that transfer market?
I mean, I think the word for it so far is just kind of uncanny because that is granted, grad transfer more than normal transfer, you kind of have a slight more accuracy rate. Mm-hmm. Still, I mean, what he's doing there is kind of absurd that I think this is Shanahan and Cox are going to make the 5th, right? The 4 and 5. And
I didn't even think about Shanahan. Yes. Yeah.
So, I mean, if that works, I mean, they're literally 3 for 3 so far, and one of them is one of the best college quarterbacks to ever play the game, and one of them is an All-American kicker. So that hit rate is kind of crazy. And then you add in the fact that almost all of them so far, with the exception of Cox, really, weren't big names. They weren't like, hey, you're plugging in Justin Fields. It's like they were a backup quarterback who never saw the field. There was a kicker all the way up in Assumption College. So there's something about the staff's ability to kind of find guys that aren't obvious. I mean, the Liam Shanahan one was, from what he told you, right? It was James Craig just kind of like found this guy at Harvard that not many people really knew about. And was just, hey, I think this guy could help us. So I think a lot of credit deserves there, or Greg McMahon finding Cole Tracy when I doubt that many people knew who he was. So I think you got to give a lot of credit to their scouting department and their ability to find these guys, because it is kind of crazy they might actually be hitting at this rate. But Cox, I mean, that one at least is a little easier to predict, because that guy could have been a second or third round pick, and you watch his film and you're like, holy crap, that guy is legitimately going to be LSU's best linebacker day one.
Yeah, and he basically said that, that it's not over yet, but like he views him as a starter. So just wild. Brody, I will talk to you in a couple of hours. Get ready for another Hold That podcast.
All right, say about 2 hours. Thanks for having me on, man. Take care.
All right, holla, bro. Stay safe over there in NOLA.